The famous UFO experiencer Chris Bledsoe says he was given a prophecy by a luminous divine feminine figure whom he refers to as the Lady. It was this: when the red star of Regulus aligns just before dawn in the gaze of the Sphinx, a new knowledge shall come into the world. Bledsoe has said he thinks this prophecy refers to events coming in 2026. Is he right? And does astrology support what he's predicted? If you like your astrology with a large side helping of woo, then you're going to love this episode. The pyramids, UFO disclosure, Gnosticism, Egyptian goddesses, eclipses, Edgar Cayce, the miracle of Fatima, the United States Space Force. It's all here. This is World Astrology Report. I'm your host, Dan Waits, and welcome to another journey into the past to understand the present and the future. Before we get into this video, I just have a quick announcement, which is that I've opened up some new consultation slots for March. I specialize in helping people find calling and purpose in life. If you need some help with that, I'd love to take a look at your astrology. Just head to the consultations page of worldastrologyreport.com. Now, in my videos, I usually try to give you concrete predictions or at least educated conjecture on what I think's coming. I'm not sure I can do that here, because what I have on my hands, which I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes, is a big handful of puzzle pieces. And frankly, I don't know how they fit together, but perhaps you do. I know there are a lot of very smart and spiritually aware people who watch this channel, so do add your thoughts to the comments as we go through this material. And we're going to start off by talking about a man who is well known by now for his alleged abilities to summon UFOs at will and supposedly even heal people, Chris Bledsoe. In 2007, after a period of personal and financial crisis that included business failure, severe stress, and declining physical health, Bledsoe began reporting sightings of UFOs near his home in North Carolina. These initial encounters involved bright lights in the sky that were later followed by other phenomena like luminous orbs, physical effects, and episodes of missing time. Bledsoe's case drew attention from UFO researchers and eventually even individuals associated with the US military and intelligence community. And I think the reason for that is the genuine nature of the phenomena around Bledsoe and their persistence over time. But the character of his experiences changed significantly in 2012. Bledsoe and his family received a lot of criticism from their Pentecostal Christian community for reporting these sightings. Some people even thought they could be demonic, and Bledsoe had come under an immense amount of strain. So finally, he decided that he wasn't going to talk about what was happening to him anymore. And it was at this time in 2012 that he first encountered the being he calls the Lady. Bledsoe's first meeting with this entity began with a vision of being charged by a massive bull, which knocked him off his feet. When he looked up, the Lady was there. He describes her as having blonde hair, dazzling blue eyes, and she was wearing ancient priestess's robes. She was only 4.5 or 5 feet tall, and she was bathed in bright light. She told him that he had to keep reporting his experiences for the sake of humanity, and that, quote, a new knowledge must arrive. Mankind must awaken to it. Who was this entity? Well, Bledsoe has been cautious about attaching a definitive identity to her, but he suggested that she represents a timeless divine feminine entity that has appeared at different times in history to different peoples in different forms. These forms include the Gnostic figure of Sophia and the Christian Mary. It's also been suggested that this woman resembles certain Egyptian goddesses like Isis and the cow goddess Hathor. Think again of the bull that charged Bledsoe. But that first encounter with the Lady was only the first of many. She came to him again at Easter in 2013. And this time, she gave him the prophecy this episode opened with.
When the star of Regulus, she called it a red star. When you look at it, it looks blue. But she said when Regulus is red on the horizon, in front of the gaze of the Sphinx, before daylight. So in other words, when it's sitting right on top of the horizon, before the sun comes up, that moment would mark a change in humanity's knowledge.
In his book, UFO of God, Bledsoe says that he has come to understand that this prophecy refers to Easter of 2026. But to be clear, the lady didn't tell him this. According to Bledsoe, people from NASA did. And this is where things start to get confusing and to raise questions about whether Bledsoe's story could be being manipulated by people around him for unknown purposes. If you're enjoying this video so far, then please do give it a like and subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so that you don't miss future missives from me here at World Astrology Report. And if you want access to my whole back catalogue of exclusive content, including my monthly in-depth live streams, then sign up as a member of World Astrology Report on my website. There's quite a lot of skepticism out there about Chris Bledsoe. People have seen how close he is to actors in government and intelligence circles, and that's made him skeptical about his story. And I can understand that caution. I will say that I've watched several interviews with Chris, and I genuinely get the impression that he's an earnest man. I don't think he's making things up. I think he genuinely has had extraordinary experiences. With that said, there are some obvious problems with this prophecy. One of them being that Regulus is a blue star, not red. What's more, Chris says he's been told that this Sphinx Regulus alignment happens in 2026. And that's something that doesn't quite make sense to me. I just can't figure out where they're getting the year 2026 from in relation to this particular alignment. The lady's prophecy seems to be referring to the heliacal rise of Regulus, which happens when a star first becomes visible on the eastern horizon just before the sun rises. The ancient Egyptians timed their whole year based on the heliacal rising of different stars. But the heliacal rise of a fixed star happens just once per year. Regulus rises before dawn in the gaze of the Sphinx, which faces east, every single year, not just in 2026. So I don't understand why Bledsoe was told this would happen in 2026 in particular. What's more, he said that he was told this happens at Easter of 2026. But Regulus isn't visible at dawn at that time of year in Egypt. It's below the horizon. Regulus actually makes its first appearance before dawn in the gaze of the Sphinx in early September. So there are weird things about this that don't really make sense and make it tempting to dismiss the whole thing. I'm not quite willing to do that yet, because there are some genuinely compelling astrological aspects to Bledsoe's story. And one of them has to do with the very same star of Regulus, which made a hugely significant transition just before Bledsoe received his prophecy in 2012. To get what I'm about to explain, you need to understand the difference between the tropical zodiac, mostly used by Western astrologers, and the sidereal zodiac, which tends to be favored by Vedic astrologers. The tropical zodiac is fixed to the seasons, to the solstices and equinoxes, while the sidereal zodiac is fixed to the actual constellations. But due to what we call the precession of the equinoxes, these two zodiacs aren't aligned. They were when horoscopic astrology was being developed around 2,000 years ago, but due to the precession of the equinoxes, they're now misaligned. When the sun is at 0 degrees of Aries in the tropical zodiac, it's at about 6 degrees of Pisces in the sidereal zodiac. And the two zodiacs are growing more and more misaligned every year at the rate of about 1 degree every 72 years. What this also means is that the fixed stars, like Regulus, which is in the constellation of Leo, are very gradually moving forwards through the tropical zodiac at the rate of roughly one sign every 2,160 years. And so here's where this gets really interesting. In about 156 BC, due to precession, Regulus moved from the moon sign of Cancer into the sun-ruled sign of Leo. What could that mean? Well, I don't know for sure, but I would note that Regulus is a star of kingship. And I'd wonder if Regulus's tropical sign might tell us something about which figures command spiritual authority in the world. Soon after that transition came the life and death of Jesus and the emergence of Christianity. It's often been remarked that Christianity is a solar religion, or at least that it's increasingly become one as time has gone by. Its holy day is Sunday, the day of the sun, after all. Again, Regulus, the king star, had just moved into Leo, sign of the sun, just before Jesus came on the scene. And for most of the last 2,000 years, most world religions have displayed a strong bias in favor of masculine energies, the sun, at the expense of the divine feminine, which is more lunar, perhaps. But here's where all this becomes relevant to Chris Bledsoe. Because at the end of 2011, on the cusp of 2012, Regulus changed signs again. It moved from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo. Of the 12 signs of the zodiac, Virgo is the only one whose image depicts a woman. Virgo is the sign of the maiden or the virgin, but really Virgo is the sign of the sovereign woman who exercises sovereignty over her own body and person. It's a sign associated with priestesses. Think of the Vestal Virgins. And guess when Bledsoe first encounters the White Lady, this divine feminine entity? Yes, it was 2012, just after Regulus's transition into Virgo. So again, Regulus moved from Leo into Virgo, the sign of the goddess, and very shortly afterwards, Bledsoe had his encounter with a goddess-like entity who gave him a prophecy referring specifically to that same star, Regulus. I don't believe in coincidences, and this one is certainly far too much for me to ignore. What's more, the lady's prophecy refers specifically to the Sphinx, which has the body of a lion, and which, according to certain researchers, may even have been constructed during the age of Leo. So again, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this, but it seems significant. And there's more. It seems that somehow this image of a star rising in the gaze of the Sphinx isn't just confined to this prophecy. It seems to be one that's known and thought about in certain US military circles. I want to give a shout out here to the YouTube channel Polarity, which has covered this subject in a video that I've linked below. In that video, the host, Josh, draws attention to symbolism connected to the US's National Space Intelligence Center, which is the intelligence agency of the US Space Force. The Space Force was established in 2019 by President Trump, and the NSIC was activated in June of 2022. And here's the NSIC's logo. That looks an awful lot like the Sphinx staring at a star. Could it be Regulus? The NSIC also happens to be based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is very well known for its connections to UFOs. What's more, there's a much older Air Force intelligence agency also based at Wright-Pat Base called the National Air and Space Intelligence Center. This is its emblem. Again, there's the star in the gaze of the Sphinx, which is all very, very strange, isn't it? Especially given that the emblem of NASIC was approved in 1994, almost 20 years before Bledsoe even met the lady. So again, I don't know what to make of all this. But there's another factor that I want to add to the mix, and that's the history of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. If you watch this channel, then you're almost certainly aware of the ongoing conjunction of Saturn and Neptune happening in the very first degree of the zodiac right now. That conjunction goes exact on February the 20th of this year, but it will remain in effect over the course of 2026. And these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions have a very interesting history, which I've covered in many videos on this channel. Much of this history has to do with very mundane developments in history, including the history of Russia and Iran. And as I discussed in this video, with the recent release of 3 million Epstein files, the current conjunction is bringing the deconstruction of the myths that have sustained Western dominance of the world and the revelation of the depravity and cruelty of its ruling class. But these conjunctions have a weirder side to them as well. Saturn represents concrete, materialized reality, while Neptune represents the ideal or the imaginal. And together, I think they can bring a thinning of the veil, a spiritualization of material reality, or a materialization of spiritual forces. Looking back through history, these conjunctions tend to be accompanied by major developments in UFO history. There was one of these conjunctions in 1917, a year that brought a series of events that are eerily reminiscent of Bledsoe's experiences. They're what's become known as the miracle of Fatima, or the miracle of the sun, which all began in May of 1917 as World War I raged in Europe. In Fatima, Portugal, 3 shepherd children reported a series of apparitions of a luminous female figure rather similar to the lady Chris Bledsoe has encountered. The figure delivered messages calling for prayer and repentance and warnings about future events. She was later identified by Catholic people around the children as the Virgin Mary, but she never identified herself that way. She promised the children that on October the 13th of 1917, she would deliver a public sign to prove that her visitations were real. On that day, tens of thousands of people gathered in a field, and what followed became known as the miracle of the sun. Countless witnesses reported that the sun appeared to spin, change color and descend towards the Earth before returning to its normal position. In the years that followed, the Catholic Church investigated these claims and eventually declared that the event was a miracle. What's more, many researchers, including the famous ufologist Jacques Vallée, have noticed that this event bore a distinct resemblance to UFO encounters. But what concerns us here is that there were some obvious similarities between Fatima and the case of Chris Bledsoe. Firstly, we have the similarity between the entities. Secondly, in both cases, the apparition gives prophecies about things that will come in the future. Thirdly, we have connections to the UFO phenomenon. And astrologically, we have Saturn-Neptune conjunctions in both 1917 and 2026. Now again, make of this what you will. I'm certainly not sure what to make of it myself. What I will say is that I think there are reasons to think that this year could see the revelation of extraordinary information. In other words, that a new knowledge could appear in the world. I think that one of the themes describing the present times is revelation. Consider the information just dropped on the world in the Epstein files. While it's easy to be cynical about their significance or to assume that much has been held back, it's clear that we really are learning more about the way our world actually works right now and about the depravity of many of the people occupying the upper echelons of power. And I don't think we've seen the end of that process. Planetary cycles I've studied suggest that the coming years are going to see a lot more coming out, not only about the contemporary world, but about humanity's deep past, including the true nature of the Egyptian civilization. In 2025, we saw the public launch of the Khafra project, a team of researchers who claim to have used satellite radar scans to uncover the presence of massive structures beneath the pyramids of Giza. I understand that they're planning on announcing more discoveries in 2026. And in my opinion, the astrology suggests that much more is going to come out about ancient Egypt over the coming years, as I discussed in this video. Hanging over all this are the predictions of renowned psychic Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. Cayce repeatedly predicted the existence of a hidden hall of records beneath the Giza plateau, specifically below the Great Sphinx, buried deep beneath the limestone. He said it contained records from a lost civilization that he associated with Atlantis. According to Cayce, the hall would be discovered when humanity reached a moment of global crisis and transition. The lady's prediction of a new knowledge and its connection to the Sphinx seems to be drawing from the same constellation of ideas. But is there any reason to think that Cayce's predictions could be particularly relevant in 2026? Well, yes, there are. In August of 2026, we'll see a total solar eclipse at 20 degrees of Leo. One of the weirdest aspects of astrology is how people's charts continue to work long after they're dead. Here's Edgar Cayce's chart, and note that his ascendant and Uranus were at 21 degrees of Leo, just a degree from the position of this eclipse. One might wonder if events this year are going to bring Cayce and his teachings into the limelight. What's more, this eclipse is in close contact with several asteroids relating to Egyptian spirituality. Most significantly, it's in a close conjunction with the asteroid Osiris and in conjunction with the asteroid Isis. Osiris was the god representing order, continuity. Isis was his sister and consort. In Egyptian myth, the god of disorder, Set, murders and dismembers Osiris. Isis gathers the scattered pieces of her husband, restores him, and with him conceives a future heir, Horus. So Isis is the intelligence that restores order and makes continuity possible. So we have another Egyptian link here, but there's also a theme at work. I wonder if this eclipse will be a herald of some sort of restoration of order and authority after their destruction. As I explained in my 2026 forecast, the early months of this year look like they contain the potential to unleash a lot of chaos and violence. In particular, there are going to be a lot of planets in the Martial sign of Aries in April. That looks like a really hot time of the year. But I wonder if we're going to see developments in the second half of the year that suggest a way forward. And perhaps the revelation of new knowledge about the true history of humanity or about our place in the cosmos could be what provides us with that sense of direction. If you followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I think a lot is going to be coming out about the UFO phenomenon in 2026 and 2027. In fact, right now claims are circulating in the media that US President Donald Trump has a speech written in which he will acknowledge that humanity is not alone. In other words, the disclosure speech. And there's even a date when he'll supposedly give this speech, July the 8th, 2026, which is the 79th anniversary of the Roswell crash. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I wouldn't pin too much hope on it. But I do think the astrology of this next couple of years supports the potential for things like this to happen. And July is the month when some truly remarkable astrology takes shape, the so-called basket formation. This is the configuration that legendary French astrologer André Barbeau thought would herald the emergence of a global civilization. It's starting to look to me like what Barbeau really saw was the emergence of a multipolar world, but its emergence is a lot more chaotic and contentious than he made it sound. But I also wonder if that same astrology could be heralding the emergence of world-changing information about the true nature of our reality. I wouldn't rule that out. And before we go, I want to come back to the figure of the lady herself and tie all this to another theme that I covered in a recent video, Gnosticism. I recently put out a video on the Gnostic qualities of our current moment. I always have to make tough decisions in these videos about what information to include and what to leave out. And one important aspect of Gnostic thought that I left out of that video was the figure of Sophia, the Aeon of Wisdom. There are some obvious resonances between Bledsoe's lady and the figure of Sophia. According to Gnostic lore, it's Sophia who gives birth to or emanates the demiurge and the Archons who govern our flawed reality. But she also furnishes humanity with something the Archons lack, our divine spark. The hidden wisdom that allows us to recognize the prison we're in and remember where we came from. Sophia is both the intelligence that falls into matter and the wisdom that teaches us how to wake up and find the way out. She's Gnosticism's rendering of the divine feminine because she represents receptivity, reflection, and interior knowing. In essence, she's the capacity of the divine to become aware of itself. And that's something we're going to need in the coming years. As I argued in my recent video on Gnosticism, we're living through a time when the wisdom of that tradition has never been more relevant. This is a time when power structures are building control structures of archonic power. I'm thinking in particular of AI and algorithms that are being put in charge of making crucial decisions with genuine import in people's lives. They're building computerized systems that are quite literally inhuman. They're doing it everywhere, and they're not slowing down, not even one bit. Our world is run by people who prize intelligence and may even have a bit of it, but they lack something even more important: wisdom. As I said in that Gnosticism video, I think the reason 1945 or thereabouts saw both the invention of the first computer and the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic library is that those texts contain wisdom that we'll need to live and thrive in a world dominated by this kind of technology. In the Gospels, Jesus delivers a famous lesson on this subject. His opponents, the Pharisees, ask him if it's lawful to pay the Roman poll tax. He holds up a coin and asks, "Whose image and inscription is this?" They reply that it's that of Caesar. And Jesus replies, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." What he's saying, at least to my understanding, is that while the state might demand total control over society, it can never own your soul. I think we should keep this lesson in mind in the coming years. And that's it for this video. In the bonus section, available for members of World Astrology Report here on YouTube or at worldastrologyreport.com, we look at the astrology of the year 2030. Because I'm seeing a few signals that suggest it will constitute a moment of reckoning for humanity, and one where the lessons of the Gnostic Gospels will become especially vital.